All right, so we're going to talk about absolute value equations and inequalities. So if you remember from your last math class what absolute value is, absolute value of a real number written like this is the distance from 0 on the number line, okay? So the absolute value a lot of times will have two different values. So the first thing we want to look at is the absolute value of x equals 4. Well, what two values have the absolute value of 4? Well, we know that it's positive 4, right? So x equals 4. But we have the negative side, the distance on the negative side of it also. So it's going to be positive 4 and negative 4, right? So now what we have to do is when we're solving these absolute values, we need to look at both sides of it. We need to look at the positive side and we need to look at the negative side. So what we're going to do is we're going to split these absolute value equations into two separate equations. One working on the positive side, one working on the negative side. So I'm going to separate this out. 2x minus 1 equals 5, and 2x minus 1 equals negative 5. And now I'm going to solve each of those equations, and that will give me my values of x. Okay, so I'm going to add 1 here. 2x equals 6, and now I'm going to divide by 2. X is going to equal 3. I'm going to do the exact same approach over here that I did before. I'm going to add 1, but now I'm adding 1 to a negative number, so I get negative 4. I'm going to divide by 2, and I get negative 2. So there's my two answers for my absolute value. Now, is it always going to be 2? Well, not necessarily. If this is 0, then you only have 1. How would I check these? How would I make sure that these are the right answers? Well, I'm going to plug it back in. We're going to do it kind of mentally. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 minus 1 is 5. The absolute value of 5 is 5. Works. I'm going to take negative 2, plug it in. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 minus 1 is negative 5. Absolute value of negative 5 is 5. It works. We checked it out. All right? Now, that's when I already have the absolute value isolated. What happens in an example like this when I don't have the absolute value isolated yet? Well, the first step is to isolate it. So I'm going to go ahead and get my absolute value of x plus 2 by itself. So I'm going to get everything else to the other side. So I'm going to add 1. So 3 times the absolute value of x plus 2 equals 9. And I'm going to divide by 3. So the absolute value of x plus 2 equals 3. I'm going to take this equation now and I'm going to split it up into two equations. I'm going to split it into x plus 2 equals 3 and x plus 2 equals negative 3. Okay? So I'm going to subtract my 2, x equals 1. I'm going to subtract 2, x equals negative 5. Now, checking these values, take that 1, plug it back in. So I'm going to do that real quick. 1 plus 2 minus 1 equals 8. Well, this is 3 in here. 3, absolute value of 3 is 3, so this becomes 3 times the absolute value of 3 minus 1. Well, this is 9 minus 1 is 8, so that checks out. If I plug in negative 5, this gives me 3 times the absolute value of negative 3 equal minus 1 equals 8. That checks out. We want to make sure we check it out because this next one may give us potential answer that doesn't work. So I already have the absolute value by itself, okay? But now on the other side, I have more than just a single value. So I need to take this and think of it as a quantity, okay? So I'm going to negate the quantity. So I'm going to break this up into the two different equations. So this is the positive side. Basically, I'm just going to ignore the absolute value and solve it. But when I negate it, I want to negate the entire side. Okay, so I'm going to put the 4x plus 5 in parentheses and solve it that way. Okay, so I have variables on both sides. personal preference, I like to move my variables first. So I move my lowest one over. 2 equals x plus 5. I'm going to subtract my 5, negative 3 equals x. So there's my first answer. We're going to check to see if that one works in a little bit. So now I have a negative here. I'm going to go ahead and distribute that negative through. 3x plus 2 equals negative 4x minus 5. Once again, I have variables on both sides. I'm going to take the smaller coefficient and move it over. So I notice I have a negative coefficient, so I'm going to go ahead and move that one over. So I end up with 7x plus 2 equals negative 5. I'm going to subtract my 2 off. 7x equals negative 7, or x equals negative 1. There's my second answer. Now, I need to go back and check these. So I'm going to take these values, I'm going to plug them back into my original to see if they work. So I have 3 times negative 3 plus 2, the absolute value of that equals 4 times negative 3 plus 5. So this gives me negative 9 plus 2 equals negative 12 plus 5, negative 7. The absolute value of negative 7 equals negative 7, which is 7 equals negative 7. That doesn't work. So negative 3 is not a solution. So we want to go ahead and try negative 1. See if it works. Absolute value of 3 times negative 1 plus 2 is equal to 4 times negative 1 plus 5. Okay? So I end up with negative 3 plus 2 equals negative 4 plus 5. Absolute value of negative 1 equals positive 1. 1 equals 1. This one works. There's my solution. Okay, so make sure you're checking for extraneous solutions. A lot of times it happens when you have variables on both sides, so you want to make sure you're checking those. Now we're going to deal with inequalities. Okay, and with inequalities, so we're going to use that same approach we used in solving. But when we negate, it's like multiplying by a negative 1. So we're going to take the inequality and change directions. So here, I'm going to go ahead and split this inequality into 2 separate inequalities. So I'm going to go 2x minus 1 is less than 5. So I'm going to solve it as is. Then I'm going to go 2x minus 1 to negative 5. But because this has now been negated, I'm going to take my inequality and change directions. Okay, I'm going to solve these just like the inequalities before. So I'm going to add 1. 2x is less than 6. Divide by 2, x is less than 3. There's my first part. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add 1. 2x is greater than negative 4. Divide by 2, x is greater than negative 2. So I'm going to come into my number line here. 0, negative 2, negative 4, 2, 4. Okay. So the first one says x is less than 3. Okay. So I'm going to go to 3. I'm going to put my little circle on, and I'm going to put a little arrow in the left, going left to the less than. My other one says x is greater than negative 2. So I go to negative 2. It says greater. So I'm going to incorporate both of these now. There's my answers here. Okay. So this is an example where they came together and we have a small width between greater than negative 2 and less than 3. So our last example here is 2x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 6. Okay. So I'm going to split this out. 2x plus 4 is less than or equal to negative 6. So now I'm going to solve this. I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. 2x is greater than or equal to 2. Divide by 2. X is greater than or equal to 1. Okay? I'm going to take the next one. I'm going to solve it. I'm going to subtract 4. 2x is less than or equal to negative 10. Divide by 2. X is less than or equal to negative 5. So I'm going to come to my number line, 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 10. Okay, so I have greater than or equal to 1. So at 1, I'm going to put a fill-in dot. I got to be greater than, so I'm going to get things to the right. So my other one says x is less than or equal to negative 5. I'm going to put a fill-in dot here. And I'm going to be less than. A lot of times we want to make sure that the original statement here is something that works. Okay, so one of the things the reason I say that is because we may have something up here that looks like this. Okay, the absolute value of x plus 1 is less than negative 2. And I have a lot of students that try and solve this. They get so worked up into solving this right away. Look at the problem. The absolute value is going to give you what type of number? Non-negative, 0 or bigger, right? If this is 0 or bigger, how can it be less than a negative number? It can't. This is no solution. Right? So look at it. What if I had this? X plus 1 is greater than negative 2. Do I need to go through all the steps and get this? I have negative 2. Well, what type of numbers are we going to get from the absolute value of x plus 1? 0 and everything bigger. Well, 0 and everything bigger, this is all solutions. Every value of x is going to work here. So this is all reals. Okay? So before you do a lot of solving, look at the problem. Read it. Make sure it makes sense. So that's absolute values and absolute value equations and inequalities.